The signal in the void. The void was quiet, too quiet. Stars burned cold and far away, casting no warmth, no sound, only endless silence. In that silence, something stirred, a broken cry across the black sea of space, a faint pulse that repeated, again and again. It was not a natural sound, not the hum of a star, not the drift of radiation. It was artificial, desperate, alive. It was an SOS, a dying voice from a world no one wanted to see. The Zirans had sent the signal. Their world burned. Their fleets shattered. Their defenses gone. Their enemies, the core Dominion, had struck without warning, without mercy. Now the survivors crouched in caves and ruins, huddled around fading fires, whispering of hope that someone, anyone, would hear their call. Their message was simple. It carried no pride, no demand, only fear. Please help us, we are dying. The Galactic Council heard it first. The council chambers were built on light and order, where words were spoken gently, where wars were meant to be avoided. The delegates sat in silence as the message played again. A weak, cracked voice echoing across their halls. Some looked away. Some folded their arms. None volunteered. Helping the Zirans would mean facing the core Dominion. And no one wished for that. One by one, the council members shook their heads. The SOS would be ignored. Another world lost. Another tragedy buried under silence, but the signal did not end there. Signals like echoes bounce in the void, and this one found its way to a different place. It reached Earth. The humans heard it. And when humans hear a cry for help, they do not forget. They do not ignore. They decide, on Earth, the halls of command were not silent. Screens flashed with the signal. Voices rose. Leaders leaned forward. Some called for caution, reminding all of the old warnings from the council. Do not trust the deathworlders, they said. Others demanded action. The people remembered Earth's past. They remembered being ignored, mocked, left behind by the galaxy. Now the galaxy had called them, and Earth would answer. Ships stirred in their hidden docks. Dark hulls rose from oceans and deserts, heavy with steel, heavy with weapons. Engines that had not burned in decades lit the skies with fire. It was not a rescue fleet, not a mission of peace. It was something else. It was humanity's Deathworld Fleet. Across the galaxy, watchers spoke in whispers. The word deathworlder had always carried weight. It meant a species from a world too harsh to survive, yet they did. It meant strength where there should be weakness, fire where there should be silence. It meant that when they moved, they did not stop. The Council had hidden Earth for centuries, keeping them in the shadows, but the SOS had pulled them back into the light. And the light they carried was not soft. It was burning. The Zirans did not know this. All they knew was hope. They waited in their ruined cities, eyes turned to the stars. They told their children stories that help would come, that someone would hear. In their hearts they pictured gentle ships of mercy, food and medicine, soldiers. To drive away the Dominion, they imagined survival. They imagined safety. But what approached was not what they dreamed. At the edge of their system, shadows stretched long. One by one, the stars blinked out as massive black shapes slid into view. Silent, cold, unmarked. Human ships, the fleet of deathworlders. The first Ziran scouts who saw them cried out with joy, believing salvation had come. Their voices carried back to the survivors. They are here. Someone heard. We are saved. But the human ships gave no words, no promises. They only moved closer. Slow and steady, their weapons primed, their engines humming with restrained violence. The Zirans could not see it yet. The Council could not accept it yet. But the truth was already written in the stars. This was not mercy approaching. This was fire. And with every passing second, the signal that once carried hope had become something else. It had become a curse. The call had been answered, yes, but the ones who answered were deathworlders, and they brought not safety, not kindness. They brought only fire. Whispers of deathworlders. The first sight of the human fleet spread like wildfire through the Ziran survivors. Broken radios crackled with joy. Voices called across the ruins. They are here. Someone heard us. Salvation has come. Hope. like a fragile flame, lit their dark caves and shattered streets. Children clapped their hands, elders whispered prayers, warriors wept quietly. For the first time since the Dominion's attack, the Zirans believed they would live, but far away. In the hidden halls of the Galactic Council there was no joy. There was only fear. The moment the first transmission confirmed human ships moving through the void, the chamber fell silent. Delegates leaned forward, their faces pale, their voices hushed. One word spread across the room, one word that carried more weight than fleets or armies, deathworlders. The galaxy had not forgotten. They had written Earth's name out of the maps, buried its history, sealed its records. They had told themselves the humans would remain hidden on their cursed planet, locked away with their storms, predators, and endless wars. But now the deathworlders had returned, and they had returned armed. Old stories resurfaced, stories of a species that thrived where no others could, stories of humans taming worlds too poisonous, too violent, too impossible for anyone else, stories of survival against every natural law. To the Council, these were not tales of inspiration. They were warnings. Warnings that humanity did not build peace. Humanity built dominance. The Council whispered among themselves. Why did they answer the call? They should not interfere. They will not bring mercy, only ruin. But no one dared say it loud. No one dared move against the Deathworlders. The fleet had already crossed the line, and nothing could stop it now. Undime. The ruined world of the Zirans. Survivors watched the skies. The black shapes of human warships filled their heavens, vast and silent. The Zirans waited for a message, for words of comfort. Instead, they received silence. Only the hum of engines, only the slow shadow of steel crawling across their stars. Some began to doubt. Why did these ships not speak? Why did no voice answer their desperate cries? An old soldier among the Zirans whispered to his people, "Have you not heard the stories? They are deathworlders." But the desperate ignored, him clinging to their fragile hope. They did not want to believe the tales. They did not want to believe that the saviors they begged for were the monsters others feared. Then came the first glimpse of human weapons. Cannons lined the sides of the ships, massive barrels that glowed faint with restrained energy. Armor thick enough to withstand whole fleets shimmered with the cold shine of black alloys. No ship of mercy carried such weapons. No fleet of peace came dressed for war. The Zirans watched in silence, the truth sinking into their hearts. These were not angels, these were not saviors. They were deathworlders. And deathworlders never came unarmed. The Council received reports from hidden observers. Every message painted the same picture. Human fleet advancing, human fleet armed, human fleet ignoring contact. The delegates sat frozen, the weight of history pressing down on them. If the humans chose to burn the Ziran world, no one would stop them. No one would even dare. The galaxy could only watch, helpless. The whispers grew into fear. On stations, in markets, in homes across 1,000 systems, beings spoke of the Deathworlders' return. Mothers pulled their children close. Old warriors remembered scars from forgotten battles. The galaxy was vast. But in that moment, all eyes turned to one world. The world that had sent the SOS. The world that now sat under the shadow of Earth's fleet. And above that world, inside the human flagships, orders were spoken, not with pity, not with kindness, but with cold purpose. For humanity remembered their own past. They remembered being mocked, ignored, abandoned when they cried for help. Now when others cried out, they answered. But they answered in their own way. Not with mercy, but with fire. The Zirans had prayed for rescue. Instead, they had summoned. The Deathworlders, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what kind of salvation humans would bring. Fire on arrival. The Zirans gathered in the broken plazas of their ruined cities. They looked to the sky where the black human ships drifted like silent mountains. The air itself seemed heavy, as if the world knew something terrible was coming. Mothers held their children close. Warriors gripped broken rifles. Elders whispered prayers to fading gods. Every eye waited for the first word, the first signal of mercy. But none came. Instead, the sky lit with fire. The first barrage fell without warning. A single human ship unleashed a storm of plasma that split the air and turned night into burning day. The ground shook, towers crumbled, the few Siran defenses that remained melted like wax under the fury. The survivors screamed, not in battle but in shock. This was not rescue. This was destruction. The Dominion forces who had started the war were caught off guard too. Their ships still hovered in orbit, feeding on the wounded planet. They had expected little resistance, no real opposition. But when the humans opened fire, the Dominion learned fear. Railgun rounds the size of houses tore through their cruisers, ripping metal apart like paper. Plasma beams cut across their formations, slicing them in half with merciless precision. One by one, Dominion ships exploded into clouds of flame and silence. The galaxy watched through hidden channels and spy satellites. The council chambers shook with angry voices. Some cried for the humans to stop, others begged for them to retreat. But none could reach them. The humans did not listen. They did not negotiate. They did not warn. They acted. And their action was fire. On the ground, Siran survivors stared in horror. At first they had cheered when the Dominion ships fell, believing the Deathworlders had come to save them. But then the humans turned their weapons downward. Massive orbital strikes rained on the cities, vaporizing whole districts in seconds. The very people who had sent the SOS were now burned by the fire they had summoned. A young Siran child cried out, asking why the humans were killing them too. No one had an answer. Even the old soldier who had warned them of the Deathworlders could only shake his head. "They do not come to choose sides," he whispered. "They come to end everything." Within the human fleet, silence ruled. No celebration, no pity, no hesitation. Every order was followed with cold precision, every strike calculated. Their commanders remembered humanity's own cries for help, the cries the galaxy had ignored. Now their response to all cries was the same. To them, mercy was weakness, and weakness had no place in the void. The Dominion fleet tried to retreat, but the humans did not allow it. They pursued with relentless speed, their ships cutting through the black like predators chasing prey. No, Dominion vessel escaped. Everyone burned, everyone shattered, everyone silenced, and still, the humans continued their bombardment. The Zirans who had begged for help now ran from falling fire, their last shelters destroyed, their last prayers drowned in thunder. Hope turned to despair, joy turned to terror. The SOS that had carried their voices across the galaxy had become their death sentence. The council could not stay silent any longer. Messages were sent, commands shouted, demands repeated. But the human fleet ignored them all. Their reply was not made of words. It was made of fire. And the galaxy realized with horror that they were watching the rebirth of a nightmare. For centuries they had whispered of Deathworlders. Now they were seeing them with their own eyes. And the truth was worse than the stories because the stories had ended, but the fire did not. When the last Dominion ship burned and the last Ziran city crumbled, the humans still did not stop. They scoured the skies, cleansing every trace of resistance. They left behind no half-wars, no survivors who could rebuild. They left only ash. The galaxy shivered. If this was what the Deathworlders brought to a single SOS, what would they do if the galaxy itself cried out? The Zirans had called for salvation, and what they received was the fleet of fire. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Council's horror in the grand chambers of the Galactic Council. Silence reigned. Screens across the walls showed the burning Siran world. Entire cities swallowed by fire, skies blackened by ash, seas boiling from orbital strikes. The delegates sat frozen, their hands trembling, their voices lost. None could deny what they saw, none could turn away. The Deathworlders had returned, and they brought only destruction. The ancient warnings had spoken of this. Do not awaken them, do not summon them, for they will not come as friends. But the galaxy had forgotten or chosen to forget. Now the truth burned across every star system, live for all to see. One elder delegate, his voice cracking, whispered, "They were supposed to be contained." His words echoed in the chamber, trembling with fear. Another delegate slammed his hand against the table. "This is madness. They are not rescuing. They are erasing. But no one disagreed. No one could argue otherwise. The council leader, her face pale under the glow of the screens, tried to speak. Her words carried little power, but she forced them out. Send orders. Tell them to stop. This is against all codes of war. 1,000 signals were sent, urgent pleas rushing toward the human fleet. But the humans ignored them. Not a single reply returned. Not a single message acknowledged. The Deathworld Fleet continued its fire. Precise, merciless, unstoppable. The Council's horror grew as every transmission confirmed the same truth. The humans were not allies. They were not saviors. They were executioners, and they answered to no one. In the outer rings of the chamber, younger species watched in terror. They had never seen Deathworlders before, only heard fragments of old stories told in whispers. Now they saw with their own eyes. One by one, their voices broke. If they do this to the Zirans, what will they do to us? Will they come for our worlds too? Will anyone be safe? Fear spread through the chamber like a sickness. The strongest empires, the oldest civilizations, all sat powerless. For once, their fleets and armies meant nothing. The humans had shown weapons none of them had ever seen. Railguns that tore through cruisers like paper. Orbital fire that turned oceans into steam. Even the Dominion feared. Across the galaxy had been swept away like dust in the wind. One brave delegate dared to speak above the fear. We should unite. We should strike them now before they grow stronger. But his words were met with silence. Everyone knew the truth, even united. Even with all their fleets combined, the galaxy could not match the Deathworlders. To strike them now would mean annihilation. So the council sat, chained by fear, forced to watch. Reports poured in from observers. The Ziran people begged the council for aid. Their cries filled the air, but the council could not move. They could not risk sending fleets into the storm. They could only whisper, "They are lost." They called the wrong saviors. They called the Deathworlders. In that moment, the council realized something far worse. This was not only about the Zirans. This was a message. The humans had not only answered a call, they had made a statement. Every burning city, every shattered fleet, every crater on the Ziran world was not just destruction. It was a warning, a message carved into ash for the galaxy to see. The council leader finally spoke again, her voice shaking. If they choose to do this again, to anyone else, who will stop them? Her question hung in the air like a blade. No one answered because there was no answer. The council had the power of laws, treaties, words. But against Deathworlders, words meant nothing. The galaxy trembled, markets collapsed, alliances broke. Fear spread like fire through the stars. No one trusted their neighbors. No one trusted the council. All trusted only one thing. The Deathworlders were awake again, and they were no longer hidden, no longer silent. They had returned to the stage of the galaxy, not as allies, not as equals, but as fire. In the ruins of the Ziran world, the flames still rose. The survivors' last cries were lost in smoke and thunder, and above them the black human ships turned slowly, their shadows falling across the council's screens. One final transmission echoed across the stars. Not words, not promises, only silence, the kind of silence that follows fire, and in that silence the council knew this was only the beginning. Mercy denied. The fires had not stopped. Smoke rose from every city, seas boiled, and the air was filled with ash that blotted out the sun. The Zirans who remained alive crawled from broken shelters, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies covered. In dust and blood they looked to the sky where the human ship still hovered silent and massive, and they cried out once more, "Please, stop, we surrender. Please have mercy." Their voices carried across old transmitters, across the ruins of their once proud world. But the Deathworlders did not answer. No reply, no promise, no comfort. Only the slow rumble of engines as the fleet repositioned. Some survivors tried to signal directly to the humans. They sent messages in every frequency, every code they knew. They begged. They offered loyalty, They promised to serve, but still there was no response. The human ships did not listen. They only watched, waiting, preparing. The Dominion forces were gone, their fleets erased in the first firestorm, but the humans did not stop when their enemy was destroyed. They did not stop when victory was certain. Instead, they turned their weapons on the very world that had called for them. To the humans, there was no difference between attacker and victim. To them, there were only threats, and threats had to be removed. In the caves, an old Siran elder knelt in silence. Children surrounded him, trembling as the ground shook again from distant bombardments. One of them asked, "Why do they hate us? We asked for help." The elder closed his eyes. "They do not hate. They do not love. They only survive." The words carried like ice, chilling every heart. Above in the human fleet, no voices wavered. Orders came cold and simple. Target remaining cities. Erase orbital stations. Cleanse resistance. There was no debate, no hesitation, no mercy, for the Deathworlders believed survival left no room for kindness. They remembered their own history, how their cries for aid had been ignored. Now they had sworn never to show weakness again, and to them, mercy was weakness. The Council begged. As well, from distant worlds, messages flooded the human channels. "Stop this madness. You are killing innocents. This is not war, this is slaughter." But the Deathworlders answered with silence. Their message was already written in fire, and the galaxy understood. They were not here to listen. They were here to remind. The Ziran's last fleets tried to rise, broken ships, patched with rust and hope, lifted into the sky. They were not strong enough to fight, but they hoped to show surrender. They hoped the humans would see them lay down their arms, but the Deathworlders fired anyway. Missiles streaked across the void, railguns thundered, and the fragile ships shattered into dust. Mercy was denied completely, without hesitation. A young Ziran soldier stood on the ground, watching the wreckage rain from the sky. His fists clenched, his voice broke. "They were supposed to save us." His commander shook his head. "No, they were supposed to end this." The difference was cruel, the truth even crueler. The galaxy trembled as the council chambers filled with despair. They had once believed the humans could be managed, could be contained, but now they saw the truth. Deathworlders answered to no one. They did not ask permission, they did not seek approval. They only acted, and their actions burned worlds. When the last city was silenced, the Zirans fell to their knees. Their voices cracked as they sent one final message. "If you hear us, if any of you hear us, know this: mercy is gone." Their signal ended in static. The humans had erased not only their enemies but their hope itself. And in the council, horror deepened. Every delegate knew this was not the end. This was a beginning. The Deathworlders had revealed their hand. They would answer again to any call. And every time the answer would be the same. Not salvation, not peace, not mercy, only fire. The fleet of fire. The sky above the Ziran world no longer looked like a sky. It was covered, consumed, buried under the shadow of the human fleet. Dozens of massive ships stretched across the horizon, blocking the stars, turning day into night. Each one bristled with weapons, railguns like towers, plasma arrays glowing like captured suns. Together, they were not a fleet. They were an apocalypse, the die. Zirans who still survived in the ruins fell to their knees. Some prayed, some cursed, some simply stared. All knew now that this was no rescue. This was judgment, and the judges were Deathworlders. Inside the ships, the humans moved with perfect unity. No fear, no hesitation, only cold precision. Orders came like iron, followed without question. Sector 3, cleanse remaining strongholds. Sector 7, orbital sweep, nothing left behind. Their commanders stood silent, their eyes hard. To them, this was not cruelty. This was survival. They believed no threat could be allowed to grow. No danger could be spared. And so their fleet carried out its duty with fire from orbit. The strikes began again. Blinding plasma storms rained down, flattening cities into glass. Railgun shells punched deep into the earth, splitting mountains. Missiles streaked across the skies, painting trails of flame that lit the ash clouds red. It was not a battle. It was not a war. It was erasure. Across the galaxy, the Council and countless worlds watched in horror. Every screen, every broadcast showed the same nightmare. The Deathworlders were not just another species, not just another empire. They were something else, something older, something that refused to die. The whispers spread like a storm. If they do this here, they can do it anywhere. Who will they burn next? Who will stop them? But no one dared move. No fleets were sent. No armies prepared. Everyone remembered how easily the Dominion had been destroyed, how ships that once terrorized the galaxy were crushed in minutes. If the Dominion could not stand against them, who could? Fear chained them. Fear silenced them. On the Ziran world, the survivors tried to run, through broken forests, across shattered rivers, into caves deep below the burning crust. But the humans saw them all. Satellites above tracked every movement, sensors mapped every breath, and the orders came again. No survivors. The fleet obeyed. A mother shielded her child as the sky opened above them. Her last words were drowned in thunder. A soldier tried to fight with a broken rifle, firing at shadows. His courage meant nothing against the storm. One by one, every last flicker of resistance was extinguished. When the bombardment ended, the Ziran world was no longer alive. It was not a planet of people, but a grave of ash and fire. Seas turned black, skies red, land cracked into endless scars, and above it all, the human fleet hung silent. They did not celebrate, they did not mourn, they simply observed, as if confirming the task was complete. Then, slowly, they moved. Engines roared as the Deathworld ships shifted formation. They turned their weapons outward, not inward, toward the galaxy beyond. It was a silent message, a threat carved across the stars. This was not the end of their fire. This was only its beginning. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Some delegates cried for defense. Others demanded surrender before war began. But the leader of the council raised her voice above the storm. "Do you not see it is too late? They have already chosen their path." Her words echoed in every system. The humans had shown their truth, and the galaxy had no answer for it. The fleet's silence was worse than any declaration, because silence meant certainty. Silence meant power. Silence meant that the Deathworlders did not fear. They did not need to speak. Their fleet of fire spoke for them, and in that silence, every world of the galaxy felt the same chill. If the humans chose to come, nothing could stop them. If the humans chose to burn, nothing would survive. The galaxy's only hope was that they would never be called again, that no one else would ever send a signal into the void, because now everyone knew. When Deathworlders came, they did not bring mercy, they brought fire. The message etched in ash: the Ziran world was silent. The flames had burned out. The smoke drifted across a dead sky. Once there had been oceans filled with life, forests alive with song, cities shining with lights. Now there was only ash, only broken stone, only glassed earth that cracked under the heat of memory. Above the dead world, the human fleet floated still, black shadows against the stars, vast and endless. Their engines hummed quietly. Their weapons glowed faintly. They did not move quickly. They did not leave in haste. They waited, as if making sure no spark remained, no survivor crawled free. The galaxy watched in frozen horror, and then the Deathworlders spoke. It was not a speech of mercy, not an apology, not even a threat shouted in rage. It was a single message, calm and cold: "We answered your call." The words repeated across every channel, reaching every station, every ship, every world tuned to the broadcast. And then came the second line, sharper, heavier: "Call us again and fire will follow." The council chambers fell into silence. Not one delegate dared to speak. Not one dared to protest. The message was clear. The Deathworlders were not allies, they were not enemies. They were something else. Something beyond control, a force that answered only in fire. On distant worlds, families huddled around screens. Children whispered to their parents, "Will they come for us?" No parent could give comfort. No leader could give promise because all knew the truth. If humanity was summoned again, no world would be safe. The Ziran ruins stood as a warning carved into reality. The SOS that had once carried hope now served as a curse. Other species looked at their transmitters with fear. Would they ever dare to send a call for help again? Was survival worth the risk of summoning deathworlders? For the galaxy had learned the answer. The cost was too high. In the human fleet, the soldiers stood in silence. No joy lit their faces. No sorrow filled their eyes. For them, this was not cruelty. It was necessity. They had lived through abandonment, through centuries of being ignored. They had sworn never to be weak again, and in their oath, mercy had no place. The ships turned at last. Engines burned, slow and heavy. The fleet began its retreat, leaving behind nothing but ruin, no beacon, no explanation, no rescue for the dying planet, only silence and ash. But the galaxy would not forget. The images of burning cities spread across every channel, etched into every memory. The name, Deathworlders, once spoken in whispers, was now carved into every star system. Children grew up afraid of the dark not because of monsters, but because of humans. Empires rewrote their laws. Worlds prepared defenses, leaders made secret plans, all to protect themselves from the fleet of fire. Yet deep down, they all knew the truth. No wall would be high enough, no fleet large enough, no planet safe enough. If the Deathworlders chose to return, nothing could stand against them. And so the galaxy carried on, trembling under a shadow that stretched across every star. In the ruins of the Ziran world, nothing stirred. The last voices had fallen silent, the last sparks of hope buried under glass. The signal that had once begged for help now echoed only in memory. It was not salvation that answered. It was judgment, not mercy, but fire. The Deathworlders had left their message behind, etched not in words, but in ash. And the galaxy would never forget it. Call us again, and fire will follow.